Hey, what's going on to all my American Horror Story fans out there, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. I am here today to give you all my thoughts, my spoiler thoughts on the first two episodes of Season 10 of American Horror Story, titled Double Feature, and Part 1 happens to be titled Red Tide. I'm so excited to talk about these first episodes. We're spoiling it all, so if you haven't seen the first episodes, go check it out. Come back and join the conversation, because this will be a very fun conversation. I'm so excited to be here with you all. But before we dive into it all, make sure you're checking me out on all my other social media accounts. If you all are new to the channel, well, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing to the channel, and while you all are at it, make sure you hit that notification bell. That way you can get the alert from when I drop new content. If you all enjoyed this spoiler review of the first two episodes, make sure to like and share the video. It helps out the channel a lot, but I also really appreciate the support. And in the comments, for all my American Horror Story fans, let's talk about these first two episodes. Number one, out of the two, which is your favorite? Number two, who's your favorite character? Who's your least favorite character? But more importantly, let's talk about pros and cons of the first two episodes, thoughts and theories, and everything in between in the comments below. So just a quick little backstory. If you all didn't know, I'm a big American Horror Story fan, but I've been out of the game for a couple seasons. I didn't see Apocalypse. I didn't see 1984 Summer, but I've been staying up to touch with Ryan Murphy. I've watched his Netflix shows. I watched Ratchet. I watched Hollywood. I wasn't the biggest fans of those shows, but nonetheless, I was excited to get back in the game. So I was like, you know what? It was like being gone from a restaurant, one of your favorite restaurants. You haven't been there in some time, but you're like, you know what? Let's go back to that restaurant. And you make my way in there. I'm like, okay, I don't see Chef Sarah Paulson. Where's Chef, Evan Peters? But okay, we got this new chef, and you get, okay, spin-off American Horror Stories. I take my first bite, and I'm like, this ain't that really good. But by the time I get to that seventh course, that appetizer called American Horror Stories, I'm like, you know what? This restaurant, they ain't making the food like they used to. I don't know what's going on here. Let's get the hell out of here. But then in comes Chef Sarah Paulson, Chef Ryan Murphy, and Chef Evan Peters. I'm like, you know what? Let's see what they got cooking for Season 10 of American Horror Story, titled Double Feature. So here we are discussing it, just my initial thoughts, and then we'll dive deep into the spoiler breakdown of the first two episodes. I have to say, for me personally, Episode 1 was fine. It had a lot of tropes that we've seen not only in this franchise, but in a lot of horror franchises. Very stereotypical, right? But once we get to that second episode, I kind of bought into it. I was really enjoying these characters. I'll talk about my favorite characters here in a second, but I was really like, okay, now I'm on board with what this show has to offer. So let me know again your favorite out of the two episodes, your pros, your cons, and let's start the conversation in the comments. But let's get into the breakdown and recapping Episode 1, which happened to be titled Cape Fear. And one thing that I really enjoy about these first two episodes so far as a whole is giving me shades of Lost Boys meets The Shining. Shining is one of my favorite horror films of all time, and I love Lost Boys. So I'm like, okay, I'm really digging this vibe with these two episodes. But let's get into the breakdown as we open the episode, meeting this new family, the Gardner family. We have, Harry, we have Doris, his wife, who's pregnant. They also have, I don't know if they reveal how old Alma is, but she's probably 9 or 10. But nonetheless, we see that she sees all this roadkill on the road, right? Which is a great kind of foreshadowing for. We open up the episode of Roadkill, and we end with episode 2 with Roadkill. So I see what you're doing there, Ryan Murphy. But nonetheless, we see that they're on their way to their destination, P-Town, Provincetown. And this is where we kind of see that quick shot of the deer whose throat's been ripped out and just pulled immediately off the road. I'm like, okay, we're dealing with some creepy crawlers, some vampires based on the posters and in the trailer that I saw. So I was really excited to kind of get into this episode 1. But the thing that really got me more excited than anything, I'm a big fan of American Horror Stories, and like I said, it's been some years since I watched the season, but I love a good American Horror Story intro, and this intro is pretty fire. But the thing that got me really excited, when I saw Sarah Paulson's name and I saw Evan Peters, I was just like, okay, we're back in the world. The theme music comes in. I'm like, strap up, let's have a good time. So let's get a little bit more of these characters, the backstory here. As we meet Harry, we learn that he is a writer. He's done some things that he's really not like that proud of, some TV shows. He's currently writing a pilot for a show now, which again harkens to my connection to this, kind of reminding me a little bit of The Shining. A guy who's like striving for greatness, isolating himself to write this novel in the case of The Shining, but writing a TV show in the case of the show. But then we also learn a little bit about his wife, Doris, who, like I mentioned, is pregnant, but she used to be a school teacher. She doesn't do that anymore. She homeschools her daughter, and she's also an inspiring interior designer, hence why they're able to stay at this place from the Browns family, because they've given them 3 months for free because they're going to redesign the interior of this place. And then, of course, we meet their daughter, Alma, who is homeschooled. She seems to be pretty smart, more smart than her age group probably indicates, but she is a violinist and she wants to be a pro by the time she's 18. So we kind of get a little bit of backstory of our main family here. We see that Harry makes his way to go get some supplies, and this is where we meet Sarah Paulson's character, who goes by the name of Karen, and she's the town's crazy lady. She warns him to get the hell out of town, and I'm just like, Sarah Paulson, I missed you. Where have you been all this time? But seeing her and the look and the design, I'm like, okay, she looks crazy. She sounds crazy. But you always, in horror films, you always listen to the crazy person because they know what they're talking about. So, and we'll get to her a little bit later. But as we see, Doris and Alma, they take a walk, and this is where they come across. At this point in time, I didn't know what to call these men, creature, vampire-like type of things, because I'm like, they can't be vampires because they're in the middle of the light. They're not like doing the vampire traditional thing. You can't eat garlic. You can't can't see across. You can't walk in the daylight. But nonetheless, they're chasing them down. They run to the house, and this is where we meet the sheriff of the town, and she kind of puts them at ease and says, hey, you got nothing to worry about. This is a small town. There's a couple druggies here and there, but you'll be okay. I'm like, okay, this is traditional horror. The cops calming everything down. The people in town know who the hell those things are, which we can call them the Pale People, I guess, is the traditional name of these vampire, or these, as we learned in episode 2, the backstory of them. But nonetheless, we hear that there's a family that's been recently killed, or not better yet, but they've been massacred in their sleep, which might be some more foreshadowing for what we can expect to see later down the road. But we see that Doris recently keeps mentioning that there's like a Lyme disease going on, which I think her mentioning Lyme disease so much in this episode and knowing what happens in episode 2, I think that might be some foreshadowing for that little girl come middle of the season or end of the season. But nonetheless, we see the sheriff again, reassures them that, you're safe. You should stay here. Everything's going to be fine. Don't worry about the little crackhead that was chasing you around. I'm like, guys, you need to get the hell out of there. But nonetheless, the same night, we see that Alma looks outside the window. She sees more of these little pale people outside, and they're definitely, like I said at this point, the characteristics are very vampire-ish, right? And this is obviously not knowing about the peel and knowing about the blood, but I'm like, okay, these are some vampires, especially knowing the poster and the teaser that I saw for this season. But Harry goes to a run, and this is where he comes across 2 dead bodies with their guts hanging out of their stomach. And the medical examiner is just like, oh, it's probably a well. Everything's going to be fine again. That's why I was just saying the episode 1 to me was just like too tropey, because it's just like, how many times have we seen this in horror movies, horror shows? American Horror Story itself was just like, all these red flags. Why haven't you guys packed your bags and gotten the hell out of this town? We'll get to that a little bit later, but again, we see that Harry doesn't tell his wife that he just found these 2 bodies, and then he instead invites her to have a date night, which unfortunately doesn't come to fruition because she's throwing up, which again kind of points towards my theory. I think that and one of my big theories, like, that little girl is going to end up taking a pill, which we'll get to that here in a second, but I think that the wife's going to take a pill, and that baby in her stomach is not going to come out to be human, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But they don't have the date night, but she encourages her husband to go out and get a drink, and he does that. And this is where we meet Mikey, played by Macaulay Culkin, who is hinting on him and offers to rub body parts against him. My two favorite characters right now, I'm just going to say it right now, Sarah Paulson as Karen and Macaulay Culkin as Mikey. They're my 2 favorite characters so far. They're having so much fun in these roles, and I'm having fun with them in the roles. But we meet our 2 other characters, Austin and Sarah, also known as Belle, as they're singing Islands in the Stream, and we learn a little bit of backstory of them. Austin has, I think they said, 3 Peabodys or 3 Tonys and a Peabody, and Sarah is also a well-known writer in the romance genre. They come across this town every couple years to really get some inspiration, and this is where they write their best material. So we obviously know that Harry is just like starstruck. He's like, oh my goodness, I know who you are. I love you guys, but I'm just this poor talentless writer. I shouldn't be talking to you all. But they're like, no, you have talent. You're one of us, and this is where the seeds start to get planted. But so out of nowhere, this is where my flaws fall in this first episode. Out of nowhere, little creepy crawler, pale creature comes in the house and attacks Harry, and this is where he kills the creature. And this is where I'm like, this is your reason to get the hell out of Dodge. And they actually have this kind of moment here as we cut to, and I'll get back to this family, but we cut to Belle and Mikey having some interaction. This is where it's like, this is concrete. Yes, they're vampires because she's sucking his blood out of his wrist. So we'll talk about them a little bit later. But we get the trope where instead of them like leaving that night, they're like, okay, well, you just killed this guy, but we'll stay overnight and we'll contemplate if we're gonna stay here in the morning or not. They're both on the same page. They're like, we're getting out of here, but I'm like, dude, you guys need to pack your bags tonight and get out of there. But nonetheless, we cut to Karen giving Belle a baby, a sacrificial baby that's not from P-Town, because there are rules about P-Town, but she gives that the baby, and this is like her protection. Her giving her these babies protect her from getting eaten by the pale people of the town. So we see the gardeners start to make their way out of the town, but then lo and behold, Austin calls Harry and offers him a solution to his writer's block. And this is where we get introduced to the little black pill. And we see that at first, Harry's like, nah, man, I don't need drugs. I'll just figure it out. And we see Austin convinces him to eventually take it. And he does take the pill with him. Harry gets a call from his publicist, I assume. I believe her name was Alma. And we get this whole thing. She's pressuring him. You got to stay there. You got to get this done because you're not going to make it out of Hollywood, man. You got to get this done. And we end the episode with Harry taking the black pill. So like I said, episode 1 was okay. It had some tropes that I've seen a million times. The pale people, the body contortion thing was like kind of got a little bit like, these aren't too threatening to me. But nonetheless, it was a okay premiere, but episode 2 was the best out of the two and really gets me excited for the rest of the season, which happens to be titled Pale because we get a little bit more backstory of these pale creatures. But let's break down episode 2 as we leave off and they're packing their things. They're about to drive away and boom, the drug kicks in, and now he is immediately inspired to write his pilot TV show and be a hit writer that he wants to be. So they're going to stay now. Alma she saw that he took that pill, and when she saw him, I'm like, she's going to take the pill because like I mentioned, she plays the violin. She wants to be a pro by 18. So I knew that she was going to inevitably take the pill. Not this early, which we'll talk about, but I knew she was going to take it. But she tells the mom, and Doris and Harry have a couples fight, and they're going back and forth, and he's like, you can tell that the side effects are definitely anger. There's some anger when you take this pill, and they're fighting and whatnot. And she eventually walks away because he's really kind of being mean to his wife, saying that she lacks inspiration, all this stuff. So I'm like, all right, we got a fight between the couple, and things aren't going to turn out well for this couple, unfortunately, I think by the end of this show. But we get our first couple fight. Like I said, he throws insults to her, and she eventually goes away. And again, he's just going back to writing. They're going to stay there. Again, if I was her, I'm taking my unborn child, I'm taking my daughter, and we're getting out of here. But she's, supportive, I guess, for whatever reasons. They've been together for a while. They're a family unit. But I'm like, you need to get your daughters, or your unborn child and your daughter out of here. But she stays. Mistake. As Harry is getting, he's writing all day. She gets him some food. He eats a turkey sandwich, immediately spits it out. I'm like, okay, this is the vampire tropes 101. They can't eat regular food. He's going to have a thirst for some blood, which we'll get into that here in a second. But we see that he is slowly getting the symptoms of the pale vampire characters. But I have a feeling, like I said, at this point, I'm like, you know what? I think that the whole family's going to end up taking this pill, and I don't think they're going to be as talented as they think they are. I think that the young girl is not going to have talent. And I think that the mom maybe not going to have talent. That's going to be like the tragedy of this season. It's kind of my theory kind of moving forward. But meanwhile, we see Harry is convinced to kind of take a break, and he makes his way out to the streets, and he gets surrounded by the pale creatures, but they don't attack him because he has the pill inside of him. They realize, oh, he's one of the talented folks. We can't mess with the talented folks. I love the allegory they're kind of speaking here in regards to taking the pill, and it brings out your talent versus the people that do take it and don't have talent. They become these pale people that we learn in this episode. But he now has a craving. He goes to the grocery store. He gets raw meat. He runs to Karen, and Karen's, yelling at him again. I'm loving what Sarah Paulson's doing with this character, just wacky and crazy and weird. But we get some backstory about her that we'll talk about here. But she's like, you should have never took the pill. He inevitably takes the meat home, drains all the blood, and now he's full on just drinking, the blood of this meat. He has the thirst now. But meanwhile, Alma is again, she brings up that she wants to take the pill, and she's kind of having this conversation with her mom, how like she's driven. She has that gene that her dad has, and it really they're making Doris feel like she's talentless, right? She's like, and this young girl, I'm going to say it now, and I hate to point out the acting, but she's like, out of the cast. She's not really delivering in the acting department for me. But, she has time to grow. Maybe when she takes that pill, maybe it'll ignite her acting sensibilities. But nonetheless, we learn a little bit about the situation at hand, that they've been there for a week now since the incident happened. And we see that he gets the thirst because his wife cuts her finger and now he has human blood. And once you have human blood for the first time, there's no way he's going back to those meat from the deli place. So nonetheless, we see that he pays a visit to Austin. This is where we get the backstory of the town and the pills. And when you're talented and you take the pills, it brings out the talent inside of you. It really kind of cracks that talent that you've been kind of lacking, or kind of, being inspired to really bring that out of you. And then the people that do take it, that aren't talent, that don't have talent, they become the pill people. And this is where he throws the pills, I don't need it, and he kind of gets more into details in regards to when you take the pill. Obviously, the side effects is you become these type of vampire people, but also it takes a lot of the minerals out of your blood, hence why they need blood to kind of continue to thrive and get their talents out. But we learn that in this point in the episode that Joaquin Phoenix and Netflix has now been given to Harry after writing these scripts. So they're all happy. All their marital issues are solved now because they're going to be rich. They're going to be famous. And, again, he's going to start writing again. He doesn't have the inspiration because he gave the pills to Austin. So we know he has to go back to Austin to get those pills, which he inevitably does. And this is where Austin tells him, hey bro, forget that meat, you need to step your game up and eat some human, which we'll get to here in a second. But we get that backstory of Austin and Belle, as they don't do this all day, every day, all year. They do this once a year, and they pick their victims because they got to get human blood. They pick their victims by going to Craigslist, and there's rules to this game, ladies and gentlemen. The rules are you don't eat people from P-Town because the sheriff and people, they kind of know what's going on, but they don't really say anything. But also never take off your gloves. O.J. Simpson. But nonetheless, we cut to Mickey and Karen, my two favorite characters, and we get a little bit of backstory of them. We learn that both of them have talent. Mickey is a writer. We see that Karen used to do paintings, and Mickey has gotten those pills that he took off of Bill, and he's like, we need to take these pills, really kind of show our talents. And at first she's like, oh, I don't want to do it. But we see Mickey does take that pill, which we'll see if Mickey really is talented. But meanwhile, we cut between the crew getting their snack. They kill the guy, and this is where we see Harry takes the blood. And now it's time to get his new teeth as we meet Dr. Philman, and played by Billy Lohr, who also goes by the name of Lurk. She's a talented individual. She used to be a doctor, or I should say a dentist, but now she's a tattoo artist. And this is where she gives him his new teeth because he's transforming into the vampire. And as I predicted, as we're cutting in between him getting his new teeth, little Elma, she takes the pills, she's doing her violin, she's playing for hours, her mom's upset, her mom is like, you need to calm down, you've been playing for hours. And then she gets that attitude that her dad had earlier in the episode, and claps back on her mom and say, you don't understand, mom, you're talentless, you're a bore, you're not like me and dad. And she's like, go to your room, young girl, and has her little emotional moment. But again, we'll talk about Elma here in a second. But cut to Harry, it's time for him to get a snack on his own as he kills his first victim at, I think they call it Dick Doc, if I'm not mistaken. But you're not going back now, Harry, after you made your first kill. But as we end the episode, we get more of the couples fighting because Alma has not been supervised by her dad. He's like, oh yeah, go ahead, I'm writing, go for a run, I'll catch you later. And the mom's like, what are you doing? We got these pale people going around town. And she's upset, she runs. I'm thinking in my head, why are you walking to look for your daughter and you don't get in your vehicle? You're pregnant. I'm just like, okay, whatever, Doris. But she goes, she comes across the pale people. She runs into her daughter. And as I, said, going back to episode 1, it opens with roadkill. And now we see the daughter, Elma, eating roadkill. I think this is kind of accelerating the process. Is she talented? I don't think so, because we saw how everything played out with Harry. He didn't immediately start eating, animals. He started drinking blood, but she went right to the animals. So I think that might indicate that she might not be as talented as she thinks she is. And also goes back to what her mom said in episode 1 with the Lyme disease. She's eating these rodents. I don't think things are going to turn out well for Alma. And we'll see if the mom takes some pills. We'll see how everything shapes out. But I'm really enjoying, again, episode 1 was fine. It wasn't terrible. It was fine. But episode 2 was fantastic. I love Karen. I love Mickey. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Mikey. It'll be interesting to see if their talent comes out and they can become famous like they want to be. Of course, we got to see what happens with the Gardner family, meet more of these characters around town, because obviously the town has to know what's going on, right? So it'll be really interesting to see who produced these pills, who's the Brown family. So there's a lot to look forward to, and I'm really excited to break it all down for you all. So I plan on watching these because I don't have cable, so I don't have FX. So I plan on watching them the following day, which is Thursday, and hopefully getting it out sometime late afternoon or late Thursday evening. So keep an eye out for that. Hit that bell so you don't miss any of my content. But there you have it. That's my thoughts, my spoiler review of the first 2 episodes of season 10 of American Horror Story. So let me know in the comments. First and foremost, if you stuck around to this point in the video, thank you so much for supporting the video. If you haven't already, make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell. That way you don't miss any of my other content. These first 2 episodes are so much more better than American Horror Stories. I'm just going to leave it at that. But thank you guys for watching the video. I'll be back next week. I'll have more videos on the channel coming soon. Candyman reviews on the channel now. But again, I appreciate every single one of you all. Hope you're staying safe, and we'll see you on the next video.